Hi, my name is Krystle Grandberry. I am a private practice owner in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my experience and hopefully share some pearls along the way about going from a corporate dentist to a private practice owner. A little background on me. I graduated from Tufts in 2017. I started right away with a small DSO on the East Coast. Starting at a corporation was the easiest thing to do for me because they promised guaranteed hours, a guaranteed per diem, and lots of free CE, which all sounded great right out of dental school with a ton of student debt. After about a year of working there, my family and I moved to Texas and I joined the largest DSO, one of the largest DSOs in the country. After 4 years there, we moved to Chicago. I learned a lot through these job changes in particular that not all DSOs are created equal and not even all offices within the same DSO are created equal. I learned a lot and had a really great experience at my office in Texas, but for the same DSO in Chicago, it was just a very different experience. The support was lacking and just not where I wanted to be long term. I also knew I was tired of changing jobs at that point. I was tired of building relationships with team members and with patients, and then just having to phase out. So I was ready to kind of find my dental home, if you will. We also knew at that point that we wanted Chicago to be our home. So it seemed like the right time to find the perfect long-term position. I wasn't yet sold on being a practice owner. So first I set out to find a long-term associateship, one that I thought I could see myself working at for the rest of my career. So the first thing was, is there such thing as the perfect long-term associateship? I realized quickly there may not be, at least not for me. Um, Specifically, we're thinking about job security. To finish your career at one office, you have to be able to guarantee that the owner or owners aren't going to sell the practice to another uh, person or a corporation. Besides you, if you're interested, but even then, there aren't always guarantees for that. For example, I have friends who were guaranteed a transition to ownership after working at a practice, and they worked there faithfully and planned to buy the practice, and eventually it fell through. The owners maybe didn't want to sell to them, or they sold to a DSO because they could get more money faster. So I also had a hard time finding an associateship that didn't require night and weekend hours. Many owners are looking for an associate specifically to work the more undesirable hours that they don't want to work. So that was kind of hard, especially here in the city. Um, After a year, I received a good amount of job offers and I reviewed a lot of contracts with these job offers. Some I knew right away weren't for me, and some I had passed on to an attorney for review. And most of them had misaligned interests. That's one tip in trying to find an associateship, if that's what you're into. I would highly recommend paying a dental specific attorney to review contracts for you. So after about a year of networking and searching, I decided if I wanted to find the perfect long-term position for myself, I might have to just create it. So I thought now might be the time to look for a practice to purchase. These obstacles I know are common concerns for a lot of dentists when considering private practice ownership, and I had them too, with debt being a huge one there at the top. So I'm just going to go one by one and kind of share with you how I handled them. So as far as debt, sometimes refinancing can help you reduce the overall interest that you're paying on your loans over time. So look into those options. We also tried to live a low burn rate lifestyle while we're paying aggressively, at least to start. We weren't eating out of ravioli cans every night. It doesn't have to be that intense, but we did prioritize savings, debt, and travel versus having nice cars and material things. We've always had a modest apartment or a home that we could easily afford versus spending at the top of our budget for those things. Um, a few other things to think about when considering your debt load and the idea of taking on more debt for a practice. I was told by bankers less than 1% of dental practice loans enter default. So, with dentists being so low risk, they really want to give you money for this. So, your debt isn't as big of a factor. Debt to income ratio isn't as big of a factor to get a dental practice loan as it would be, say, if you're trying to get a home loan. So, that was really settling. A few good tips to get the loan. Your banker is going to want to see that you have some savings. Around 10% of the practice purchase price is a good number. Though if you're buying a much more expensive practice, even about $50,000 in savings looks good too, even if that's a smaller percentage of your overall purchase price. They will also want to see that you can produce as a provider, whether that's through production reports or your income. And then they'll just overall analyze your financial situation with a credit report, etc. Overall, you just want to look financially responsible. So if you don't have a ton of savings, but you've paid off a ton of student loans, they'll take that into consideration. But you do want to have some savings. So don't dump it all into your student loans right now if you're planning to buy a private practice. And definitely don't buy that fancy car just yet. The knowledge to be a practice owner, do I know enough to buy and operate my own private practice? I personally took advantage of all the free CE I could, especially in business and leadership. Some corporations are really good for this. The corporation I was with in particular was really good and encouraged the dentist to be the leader of the practice. So I feel like I got a lot of good education from them. Um, if you're working at an office that empowers you to look deeper into the business side of things, take advantage of that and learn as much about the business side of things as you can. And then, of course, it's okay to splurge on high quality CE sometimes too, like these courses offered by Clinicians Report, for example. Experience. In my opinion, I'd work as an associate for at least a couple of years, if possible, for at least two different offices. Having experienced multiple offices, working with different teams in different demographics, in different situations, I feel like I learned a lot from all of these situations. I personally worked for 6 years prior to buying. I probably didn't need the full 6 years, but this gave me a lot of time to get my clinical reps in and really get comfortable with bread and butter dentistry, as well as some exposure to more complex dentistry like endo, implants, and surgery. Also, start networking now, surrounding yourself with people who have more experience than you and getting everything that you can from them. Connecting with your peers that have similar goals, are doing similar things as you, and working together, learning together. Of course, then commit yourself to lifelong learning. You're not going to feel 100% experienced and ready to go right away. But if you commit yourself to lifelong learning, which we all should really in dentistry, and use action plans to implement the things you learn into your practice all the time, the experience comes. Uh, location was a really hard one for me because we fell in love with our particular neighborhood, and my family committed to living in the city, specifically on the north side of Chicago, which is a very saturated area. for dental offices. So I decided I was going to have to do an acquisition. Not that a startup would have been impossible, but it would have been a little harder. And with all of the other hurdles I was facing, I personally decided it'd be better to buy versus doing a startup. In my opinion, I would want to consider where you and your family are most comfortable, where you want to live long term first, and then consider the market saturation there. Do you want to do a startup or an acquisition? And then look at all the other factors like the target demographic and population growth for the area. Work-life balance, that was an obstacle for me because coming from a corporation, I feel like you heard a lot about how a work-life balance is impossible as a private practice owner. Working within the corporation, they take away XYZ work from you. So, sticking with them allows you to have that work-life balance that you could never have in private practice. Um, and a good work-life balance has always been important to me. I focused first when I was looking for practices on practices that already had a schedule that I would like. I also took into consideration collections versus expenses and how many hours and what days the owner was working. So I could consider how much I would need to work to cover those same expenses, plus service the practice loan and make a good living on my own. I also wanted to take into account how much time I'd be spending working in the business versus on the business and making sure that there would be enough time there to allow for a fair work life balance still, especially while considering growing my family. Growing a family, this one isn't for everyone, but if it is something that you want and you have a supportive partner, family, friends, neighbors, a village, if you will, it can be done even as a private practice owner. Just be sure to prioritize the time you have with your family, and when you're able to be with them, be truly present in those moments. Speaking of growing a family as a practice owner, it can be done. Like I said, this is my daughter and a drawing she came home from school with, where she drew herself and her dad on the right in the green, our dog, Penny, who also has the same head, legs, and ponytail as the rest of us, and myself and her baby sister there in the middle in the red. She is very excited to be a big sister this summer. Finding maternity coverage is probably going to be my greatest challenge yet, especially having such a small practice and no room for an associate. I am sure this experience differs between male and female practice owners, but I'm using that network that I created to make it work. Another helpful resource for me has been the Mommy Dentists in Business Facebook group. Here you can find a lot of tips and camaraderie around being a mom and a business owner. There are free and paid memberships depending on the type of support you're looking for. Even with this big challenge ahead, I feel like there's still more pros than cons to owning my practice. Back to how I went about it, buying the dental practice that I have now. I knew I was looking now to buy a practice on the north side of Chicago, so I set up parameters around what I was ideally looking for. The location was one of the most important things to me because I don't like a long commute. I also didn't want to work long hours or nights and weekends. So I sought out a practice already doing well without having those hours, which in the city was hard. It took me over a year to find my practice. I would recommend before you set out looking to think of the things that are most important to you in a long-term position and write them down. This can change over your search, but it's important to have a starting point. I designed mailers and sent them to offices in the area that didn't seem like corporations and that had dentists working there who might be nearing retirement age. And I started networking. I joined the ADA, ISDS, CDS, and started going to meetings and meeting older dentists that were also, well networked and met a lot of people through them. And I reached out to nearby specialists. I looked at practice listings all over the internet, Facebook, CDS, website, and then finally brokers. I hoped to find a practice without a broker, but that is eventually how I found my practice. Um, I did end up making one big compromise, but it's actually been great so far. I have 3 operatories instead of the 4 to 6 that I was originally looking for. I thought that might be too small, but it's been great for the work life that I need right now. It allows me to have a smaller team to manage, a lower overhead, and just lower pressure overall. So that's one tip is one, be open to compromising on certain things, but also keep in mind the big shiny practice and the extra debt load that comes with it may not always be worth it. One huge resource for me were these couple of things from made by Brian Hanks. While I was searching for a practice, I was trying to learn everything I could about the process of buying. I found this book and podcast super helpful. I learned a lot about what to look for in a good attorney and accountant, how to analyze a practice, and all the steps of buying from the letter of intent to financing, due diligence to closing. A few main takeaways from these things. Number one, the most common mistake is actually waiting too long to buy. It seems like a big leap to do early on in your career, especially with the cost and the amount of debt that you come out carrying a lot of the time. But making the leap sooner, in theory, should increase your income sooner, allowing you to pay off that debt sooner. Number two, in addition to other factors that we already talked about, when looking for a practice to buy, another big thing to consider is are procedures that are being done currently at the practice procedures that you're comfortable with. So, if this office, for example, does a lot of endo and endo is not something that you're comfortable with or that you do, that may not be the practice for you, or at least the transition may not be as seamless. You will have to have a plan for this. So they refer out a lot of oral surgery, and you like to do oral surgery. So maybe you can plan on replacing some of that endo revenue with oral surgery. But these are things you should think about ahead of time and have a plan for. Number three, in regards to collections and immediate take home pay, buying a smaller, more efficient practice can often pay off more quickly than buying a larger, less efficient one. For example, bringing home 40% of $800,000 in collections is greater than 30% of a million. So make sure that you're looking at the overall picture, not just the yearly collections, because that's the number most brokers are going to bring to your attention and base their practice purchase price on. But you want to look at the whole picture. And then lastly, remember a lot of this process is about relationships. So network, build a good team to support you. Your accountant, attorney, and banker, should all be on your side. And don't get too caught up in the business transaction and the stress of the transition and forget to be a nice professional person, especially when it comes to dealing with your support system, the seller, your new team, your new patients. So, how things are going for me now, I work 3 to 3.5 days per week on patients, so no night or weekend hours. This gives me ample time to do admin and other owner related tasks within business hours. I still have some student debt. I went to Tufts, but I can pay it down faster as my interest rate is lower. I did refinance, and my income is higher. I'm actually working harder though on paying down my practice debt right now because the interest rate is higher than the interest rate on my student loans. I have 3 amazing team members who I hope always know how appreciated they are. There really is no good substitute for a good team. Some takeaway tips from my last little over a year of practice ownership, so new practice ownership are, if you have a great team, take great care of them, both financially and mentally, emotionally. I found this to be a good book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, when it comes to interacting with and leading people. But there are tons of good books on this topic. So definitely invest some time and effort in that. Prioritize a work-life balance, whatever that means to you. Maybe you prefer working nights and weekends. Do what makes sense for you, and make sure that that's a priority. And finally, build a network of dentists, specialists, people who can support you. Finally, the bottom line, if private practice ownership might be for you, and you happen to be at a DSO now, take advantage of all the experience and free clinical, business, and leadership CE that you can now. Dig into the P&Ls if you're allowed, ask questions, and learn about the norms of the business regarding dental practice finances. Because I know at least I learned nothing about that in dental school. So learning about that before buying a practice was super helpful. Always work with a good dental-specific attorney, whether you're looking at an associateship or a practice to buy. You can buy a dental practice when you have student loans. That is a common misconception. And you just have to be intentional about paying your loans off and maintain some savings. Don't spend frivolously. And you can buy a dental practice and be successful in a saturated area. You just may have to make some compromises, like in any other situation. You can have a great work-life balance and grow your family as a young private practice owner, if that's something that you want. And finally, private practice ownership does not have to be lonely. I personally was afraid of this when leaving the corporate bubble. The corporation I worked for had me just convinced that it was so much better to work under this support organization. But there are huge costs to that too, especially financially. So when you're ready to go out on your own, just be really intentional about building a support network, both professionally and personally. In Chicago, this might look like going to your local CDS branch meetings. Anywhere, including Chicago, you might want to call up your local endodontist or orthodontist and take them to lunch and meet their friends. On the personal side, ask for help when you need it. Join a local moms or family group online, or in person, and of course, lean on your partner or village when needed. I want to thank Clinicians Report for giving me this cool opportunity to reflect upon and share my story. I am hopeful that this was helpful for someone out there considering the leap from corporate dentistry into private practice ownership. This is me and my family here in the corner. The reason I don't like a long commute or working nights and weekends. I love my job and my practice, especially now, but these guys are really just everything to me. I have my personal email here on the slide. If anyone wants to reach out for further dialogue or questions on this topic, please feel free. Thank you.